Good Tuesday evening, everyone. Brent Hubbs, Grant Ramey from Madison Square Garden in New York, where the Tennessee basketball team beats Miami by a score of 75 to 62. Top-ranked Vols remain unbeaten. Grant Ramey, Rick Barnes loves New York, so he got to stroll around the city, see some of his favorite sights. His team remains unbeaten, and then they had that lull. So Rick Barnes is going to leave the Big Apple with everything he wants: a win, his favorite city, and plenty of coaching points.
Yeah, you know what? I expected him to come into his post game and just kind of tear into his team and be that same Rick Barnes that kind of focuses on what went wrong instead of what went right. But he came in smiling, having a good time. He said they built that lead. They kind of gave it up, but they did a good job answering the run. And I think that's what they have to do. What you have to do in basketball, it's a game of runs. You got to be able to answer. Tennessee answered with a couple big shots, a couple big possessions there after Miami got it back down to whatever it was, six with about 6 minutes left. So number one team, they've kind of embraced that whole thing. And Rick said Madison Square Garden is a stage and not a court. And they kind of came out here and really kind of handled themselves well. I mean, it was a 14-0 run the final 7 minutes, 8 minutes of the first half. Didn't allow a point over the final 7:57 or something like that. So, and played well in the second half too. And they answered the run like Rick said. So, pretty good night of business for this basketball team, and they handled it well.
Yeah, I'm continued to be impressed by some guys on this team. No surprise by Zakai Ziegler, obviously. 13 points, 9 assists, 4 rebounds. Big for him to play well in a homecoming. I know this game playing up there meant a lot to him. But Chaz Lanier with the closeout tonight. He scored 7 of Tennessee's last 9 points. There are going to be nights where he has to be the bell cow like he was tonight. I think that's a nice step for him with this team to take early in the season. Fair or not fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And Rick, after the game, said Chaz has to do more to take a bigger step in this offense, which is crazy because he's playing for the number one team in the country. He's at Madison Square Garden. He just scored 22 points on about 50% shooting and about 50% from the 3 point line, over 50% from the 3 point line. That's a pretty good step in the right direction. But Rick said he's kind of standing around a little bit too much, letting himself kind of get shadowed by defenders. He's got to screen more. He's got to move around without the ball more. I think Rick said he gave him an A+ grade, but there's so much more he can. I think that's the exciting part. He can come here and he can score 22 points and he can lead you in that kind of win. And there's so much more that's out there for him. Jim Larinaga mentioned after the game, Miami's head coach, they played him last year at North Florida, and he just looks so much different this year because he's surrounded by so much more talent. So I think there's a little bit of adjustment still to go and a lot more upside that could still be reached.
Yeah, I'm amazed by a guy who has that kind of scoring ability at all three levels. It never feels like the game is forced at all.
Right.
It's like you're watching him play and you're like, man, like do like go. Not everybody on the team's waiting for him to go, but I think as a spectator and someone following the game, you're like, dude, like go get it. And it feels like he's always waiting for it to come to him, which is really unusual for a high volume scorer, in my opinion.
Right. And you got to think Tennessee in the last two trips to this building, the Sweet 16 against Florida Atlantic, they went 6 for 23 from the 3 point line. That Jimmy V Classic 3 years ago, they went 6 for 39 in an overtime game against Texas Tech. They lost 57-52. And obviously, Chaz has nothing to do with those two performances, but it can be hard to come into this building and score and play well. And on that first possession, what happens tonight? 14 seconds into the game, Chaz Lanier just steps into a three and knocks it down. And it's like he just looks fine, like he's in any other building, playing any other game. He just kind of does his thing where he's got a quick release. He's going to make shots. He's going to score. I think Chaz could show up to a barn and put a crate on the side of the wall, a milk crate, and just shoot and play well and score. I think he's just a scorer. A scorer of the basketball, shoots it well no matter what's going on, where he is. And we've seen that for the first 9 games, and I don't see any reason why that's not going to continue.
All right, a couple of things before we wrap it, or as we wrap it up here. Is it fair to say Cade Phillips is coming, that he's really coming on, or is this, hey, he's got a nice little run here and there's so much more for him to go to? It looks to me like the game maybe slowing down. He's getting much more comfortable with whatever rotation of guys he's in with. Is that a fair assessment or not a fair assessment, Grant?
Yeah, that's fair, and it has to continue. Like Tennessee's going to need Cade Phillips to continue to give them good minutes off the bench. Cade's biggest thing is he knows exactly what his role is, and he goes about it 100% trying to fulfill that role, trying to do nothing else but what his team needs him to be versatile, to hit the glass on both ends of the floor, to score it around the rim, to screen and help get his teammates open, stuff like that. Like that's what he's going to do: protect the rim, rebound. And he looks physically different than he did last year. He's the most year-over-year difference guy that we've seen so far. And he's going to have to continue stepping that because they had 8 scholarship guys here tonight without Darlin Stone Dubar again. So they're going to rely on him to. And Felix Ogpar kind of struggled a little bit tonight. So they're going to need those minutes off the bench from those bigs starting with Cade.
Yeah, and again, I think depth is the one concern you have when you look at this team and you think about the marathon and not the sprint right now. That's always a concern. Tennessee turns around, they get home, they're home for 48 hours or so, and then they go to Champaign, Illinois. What's the next challenge? What's the next step for this team as they go into a hostile environment against what will be undoubtedly a physical basketball game against Illinois?
Yeah, I mean, the next test is just going on the road because it's going to be a really, really, I would assume, an elite atmosphere at Illinois because this is the number one team in the country. Rick Barnes talked about that on Monday, kind of what you have to expect as the number one team. You get a little bit of an extra effort from your opponents trying to take down that number one team. Now you're going on the road. It's one thing to do it neutral site, Madison Square Garden, Jimmy B. Classic. It's another thing to go to Illinois and do it. And Tennessee went to Louisville, second game of the season, played in front of whatever it was, 16, 17,000. Louisville was a whiteout for that game. They're trying to, kind of build that program under Pat Kelsey. That was a good test, and since he passed it with flying colors, I think it's going to be a little bit of a different test against an Illinois program that's a little bit more established. You know what you're going to get. You saw what they looked like in Knoxville last December. A really good basketball team, a really good basketball program. It's going to be a tough test to pass, but so far they're 9-0. They've passed every test that's been in front of them, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Tennessee's 9-0. They beat Miami by a score of 75-62. That's the lowest scoring margin of victory for Tennessee this season, which says a lot about what it's been like for Tennessee to start. The test continues as they go to Illinois. We'll have full coverage of that coming up on Saturday, but we have full coverage from the Garden from Grant Ramey tonight. That's going to do it for this edition of the Exterior Home Solutions Fast Break. He's Grant Ramey. I'm Brent Hubbs.